The final signature on the acquisition contract was a kill shot. And Leo Sterling was the predator. He had just devoured a rival company. A ruthless move that would dominate headlines and add another $1 billion to his valuation. His team was celebrating. The champagne was flowing. But as Leo stood alone in his glass-walled office, staring down at the conquered city, he felt nothing. The thrill of the hunt was gone, leaving only a familiar, hollow silence. He had won. Again. So why did it feel exactly like losing? He needed a distraction. Any distraction. And tonight, a charity gala beckoned. The city lights of San Francisco blurred into a watercolor wash through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sinclair Grand Gallery. Outside, a November rain was cleansing the city. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and calculated conversation. Leo Sterling adjusted his platinum cufflinks. At 32, he was the chief architect of Nexus Dynamics, a tech empire that had reshaped how the world connected. He could value any company, any asset, any deal, but he couldn't put a price on the familiar emptiness that echoed in his chest. Tonight was a charity gala for underprivileged children, a carefully scheduled social obligation between board meetings and international flights. It was meant to be meaningful. But to Leo, it was just another room, another mask. He moved through the crowd with practiced grace. Respectful nods. Inviting smiles. Investors seeking a moment of his attention. It was a dance he knew by heart. But tonight, the music felt off-key. That's when he saw it. Tucked away in a corner, separate from the high-value pieces by renowned artists, was a section for student art. And there, one painting stopped him cold. It had no technical perfection or polished brushwork. It depicted the silhouette of a child releasing a single paper lantern into a twilight sky. Most of the canvas was dark, but the light from the lantern was impossibly warm and alive. It wasn't just paint on canvas. It was a defiance, a declaration that even in the deepest darkness, there was a light worth fighting for. The painting radiated something money couldn't buy: authenticity. It tells a story, doesn't it? Leo turned. A soft voice had cut through his thoughts. The woman standing there wasn't draped in designer labels. She wore a simple, emerald green silk dress that complemented her warm brown eyes and the long, dark hair that fell naturally over her shoulders. Her smile wasn't a social tool. It was a genuine invitation. "Yes, it does," Leo replied, finding himself truly seeing her, instead of just scanning past as he did with everyone else. "Are you familiar with the artist?" She laughed, a sound that was clear and unguarded. "I should be. I painted it." She extended her hand, a gesture of natural grace. "Camila Rivera." Leo Sterling. He took her hand, feeling its warmth and perhaps the slight calluses from a paintbrush. "I teach art at Lincoln Elementary in Millbrook," she explained. "This piece was inspired by one of my students. She comes from a very difficult background, but she never loses her kindness." "You captured that," Leo admitted, his eyes still on the painting. "The way you used light to represent resilience. It's remarkable." Camilla's eyes lit up with surprise. "Most people just see it as a simple painting." "You understand art?" "I studied art history a lifetime ago," Leo confessed, sharing a part of himself he rarely exposed. "Before Nexus consumed everything. My father used to say a blank canvas held more possibilities than any stock portfolio." He paused, surprised at his own openness. As the gala began to wind down, an unexpected impulse rose in him. I don't want this conversation to end. Would you have dinner with me, Camila? She hesitated, glancing down at her simple dress. I'm not really dressed for anywhere expensive. You're dressed perfectly, Leo said. And he meant every word. He didn't take her to a 3-Michelin-star restaurant. Instead, he led her to a family-owned Italian trattoria in North Beach, where the owner greeted him by name and the air smelled of sautéed garlic. The atmosphere was intimate without being pretentious. This isn't what I expected, Camila confessed as they settled in. What did you expect? Flashier. More expensive. Isn't that what men like you prefer? Leo considered it for a moment. Flashiness often separates you from authentic experiences. This place. It reminds me of simpler things. 2 days later, Camila was back in Millbrook, a small town 2 hours and a world away from the hustle of San Francisco. Her life was made of classroom days filled with the laughter of children, quiet evenings with her mother, Rosa, and dreams of a community art center sketched in notebooks. At the town's only coffee shop, an old high school acquaintance stopped her. Heard you were hobnobbing with the big shots in the city, Cammy. Don't forget us little people. The comment was a small sting, a reminder of the chasm between her world and the one she had just stepped into. It planted a tiny, uneasy seed in her heart. Leo's call came at the end of the week. Escape the city with me. I have a place in Lake Tahoe. His lake house wasn't a sprawling mansion. It was a modern frame of cedar and glass, nestled among the pines overlooking the crystal-clear water. It felt like a retreat, not a display of wealth. They spent the day hiking forest trails, cooking meals together, and sharing stories by the fire. The space between them, once measured in miles and tax brackets, had shrunk to the width of a sofa cushion. That evening, as the fire danced and a light snow began to fall outside, Leo looked at Camila and felt a connection stronger than any business deal he had ever made. He leaned in and kissed her. The kiss started gently, but quickly deepened, carrying the weight of all the conversations and quiet moments they had shared. Without a second thought, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom. The soft lamplight fell on her face, and he saw not just desire, but a fragile, absolute trust. As his hands traced her soft skin, he felt a subtle hesitation in her breath. She whispered his name, her voice barely audible. Leo. Wait. I've never. Her words hung in the air. Leo stopped completely. Everything in him, every instinct honed in a world of calculated moves, told him to press on. But something deeper, a part of him he thought long lost, rose to the surface. He looked into her trusting eyes. Gently, he pulled the duvet up over her. Did I do something wrong? She asked, her voice full of confusion and hurt. Leo shook his head, his own voice thick with emotion. No, Camila. You did everything perfectly right. That's the problem. He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. What you're offering, it's a gift. And a gift like that doesn't belong to a weekend fling. It belongs to a lifetime. He looked her straight in the eye, a promise forming in his soul. And I'm going to earn it. Properly. The next morning arrived with an almost sacred stillness. Sunlight glittered on Lake Tahoe, and the crisp air smelled of pine and new beginnings. Leo had woken on the living room couch, having left Camila to sleep peacefully in the master bedroom. He hadn't slept. Not from regret, but from a startling certainty that was settling in his veins. The drive back to San Francisco passed in a comfortable silence, punctuated by Camila's laughter as she pointed out a funny-shaped cloud, or hummed along to a song on the radio. Leo found himself memorizing these details, the way the sun caught her hair, the small crinkle by her eyes when she smiled. He was building a new portfolio, one measured in moments, not zeros. But as the door to his penthouse swung open, reality crashed down on them. Patricia Wells, his executive assistant, was waiting in the living room. Her expression, usually a mask of calm competence in the face of billion-dollar crises, was uncharacteristically tense. "Good morning, sir." "Ems. Rivera," she nodded politely. "Mr. Sterling. We have a situation." "What is it, Patricia?" Leo asked, a protective instinct causing him to step unconsciously closer to Camila. "Sebastian Cross has been calling all morning. He says it's urgent." The name landed in the pristine quiet of the penthouse like a shard of glass. Sebastian. For a fleeting moment, Leo wasn't in his multi-million-dollar apartment, but back in a cramped Stanford dorm room, arguing over lines of code, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared, ferocious ambition. They were friends. Once. Brothers in arms. Ready to conquer the world together. Until the world taught them a brutal lesson, there was only room for one at the top. Leo took a deep breath, motioning for Camila to sit on the plush sofa. "I'll handle this." He walked into his private office, closed the heavy glass door, and dialed Sebastian. The call connected instantly. "Leo, my friend," Sebastian's voice oozed, slick with false warmth. "I hear congratulations are in order. A lovely little art teacher, I believe?" The condescension in Sebastian's voice made Leo's jaw tighten. "Get to the point, Sebastian." "The point is," Sebastian continued, his voice turning cold, "your romantic escapades are about to become very public. I have photographs from the gallery, the restaurant, even your poetic little lake house. Imagine the headlines. Tech Titan's tender heart halts ticker." A sliver of ice slid down Leo's spine. "What do you want?" he growled. "Sell me your controlling interest in Nexus Dynamics, and the story vanishes," Sebastian stated the terms, without a hint of hesitation. "Refuse, and I will make sure every investor, every competitor, every person in this world knows that the great tech emperor has gone soft over a naive little girl. I will burn your new little world to the ground." The call ended. Leo stood motionless, staring out at the city he had conquered. Now, every skyscraper looked like a tombstone for his privacy. He returned to the living room, where Camila waited, her eyes filled with concern. He was used to solving problems alone, to building walls no one could touch. But looking at her face, he knew that wall had to come down. He sat beside her and told her everything, his voice terrifyingly even. He was prepared for tears, for panic, or for accusations. But Camila just listened silently, an intelligent focus in her eyes. "So," she said after he finished, her voice surprisingly calm, "he's using me to get to you." "Yes," Leo admitted. "He's betting that I'm more afraid of losing my empire than I am of losing you." Camila stood and walked to an abstract metal sculpture Leo had bought at an impulsive auction. She ran her fingers along its cold surface. One of my students, a little boy named Sam, is terrified of making a mistake, she said softly, not looking at him. He'll stare at a blank page for an hour, afraid to make the first mark because it might not be perfect. She turned to face him. He's so afraid of what could go wrong that he never starts what could go right. Sebastian wants you to live in that fear, Leo. He wants you to protect what you've built, instead of fighting for what you love. You can't do both. Camila's words were like a key, unlocking a door in Leo's mind he didn't even know was locked. The cold dread began to dissipate, replaced by something hotter, righteous anger. Sebastian had miscalculated. He thought Leo was the same man he used to be, a man who would sacrifice anything to protect his bottom line. He didn't know that, in a few short days, Leo's definition of the bottom line had completely changed. He hadn't built Nexus Dynamics just to bow to a bully. He had built it on audacity, on making moves no one saw coming. And now, he was about to make the most audacious move of his career. He looked at Camila, and in her eyes, he saw not fear, but unwavering trust. It was all the reinforcement he needed. Leo stood, pulling out his phone. But he didn't call Sebastian. He called Patricia. "Patricia," he said, his voice now firm and full of authority. "Clear my morning schedule. And book the largest conference room we have." He paused, looking at Camila and breaking into the first genuine smile since Sebastian's call. "It's time we released a statement of our own." The Nexus Dynamics press conference room was a sterile space of glass and steel, designed to project power and control. Now, it felt like an arena. Dozens of reporters, the sharks of the media world, had gathered, smelling blood in the water. Camera flashes went off incessantly, sharp and merciless. Leo stepped up to the podium, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. He could feel his own heart beating against his ribs, a frantic drum of nerves and resolve. He glanced into the wings, where Camila stood. She didn't belong in this world, but she was here. For him. She gave him a small nod, a tiny gesture that held a universe of belief. She was his anchor. He cleared his throat, and the room immediately fell silent. "Good morning," he began, his voice amplified through the speakers. "I've called you here today to address some rumors regarding my personal life and its potential impact on Nexus Dynamics." He paused, letting the tension build. "The rumors are true. I have met someone." A murmur rippled through the room. "Her name is Camila Rivera," Leo said her name clearly and with pride. "She is an art teacher. A woman who has reminded me that a company's true value isn't just its stock price, but its soul. She has shown me that true success isn't measured in market share, but in moments of genuine human connection." He looked directly into a central camera, as if speaking directly to Sebastian. "So, to be clear to Mr. Cross and anyone else who believes you can leverage a person's heart for financial gain, I will not be selling my company. I will, however, be asking Ms. Rivera to marry me." The room exploded. "My personal life is not a liability to this company," Leo concluded, his voice rising above the noise. "It is now its greatest asset. Thank you." He stepped down from the podium without a backward glance, and went straight to where Camila was waiting, took her hand, and led her out of the arena. Back in the quiet of the penthouse, the adrenaline began to fade. Patricia's call came. "Sir," she said, her voice filled with astonishment. "The market is reacting. The stock is climbing. Analysts are calling it bold transparency. They love the story." A wave of relief washed over Leo. His business gamble had paid off. But when he turned to Camila, he saw her smile had vanished. She was staring at her phone, her face pale. On the screen were the tabloid headlines, "Billionaire's Small-Town Cinderella," alongside hundreds of vicious comments. "They're calling me a gold digger," she whispered, her voice cracking. Just then, her phone rang, the name Mom flashing on the screen. She answered, turning away from Leo. He could only hear her side of it. "No, Mom. It's not like that. I know. I'm sorry you have to hear this." His victory suddenly felt hollow. It had been built on her pain. The protection he had promised had failed. He walked over and gently took the phone from her hand. "Pack a bag," he said decisively. "We're going to Millbrook." Camila looked up, her eyes wet with tears. "Leo, we don't have to." "We do," he interrupted. "They can say whatever they want to a screen. Let them try to say it to my face." Millbrook felt like another world. No glass towers, just quaint houses with white picket fences and quiet streets. But the silence was judgmental. Leo could feel the stares from behind window curtains as his car drove by. Rosa Rivera's house was small, clean, and filled with the smell of home baking. She was a woman with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. She was not impressed by money. "So, you're the man who put my daughter's face on every television in the country," she said directly, without preamble. Leo met her gaze without flinching. "Mrs. Rivera, I'm not sure anyone is good enough for your daughter. But I love her. And I will spend my life trying to be worthy of her trust." He made no excuses. He took responsibility. He stayed all afternoon, drinking her coffee, listening to stories of Camila's childhood, and answering her pointed questions with patience and sincerity. Slowly, he saw the protective ice in the mother's eyes begin to thaw. That night, in the backyard of Rosa's house, the air was crisp and quiet. The stars seemed brighter and closer in Millbrook than they ever did over the city. They had weathered the day together, a small storm of whispers and curious glances. They had done it as a team. "Thank you," Camila said softly, "for being here." "I'll always be here," Leo replied. He knew this was the moment. Everything had led to this. He took a small box from his jacket pocket. Inside wasn't a giant diamond. It was an elegant ring with a single, small sapphire, the color of the night sky. He had bought it at the town's only jewelry store that afternoon. "Camila," he began, his voice growing formal as he sank to one knee on the damp grass. "6 months ago, my world was built on numbers and assets. It was big. And it was empty. You filled it with color. With light." He looked up at her, his heart in his eyes. "You taught me to choose love over fear. Now, I want to choose you. Every day. For the rest of my life. Will you marry me?" Tears began to trace paths down her cheeks. But they were tears of joy. In her mother's quiet garden, under the silent witness of the stars, she whispered the single word that reshaped their entire future. "Yes." The community church in Millbrook had no vaulted ceilings or polished mahogany pews. Instead, it had simple stained glass windows through which the afternoon sun streamed, painting warm patches of color on the wooden floor. The air smelled of old wood and the wild flowers that had been placed in jars, taking the place of expensive orchids. In the front row sat Camila's students, their eyes wide with wonder. Leo stood at the altar, but he saw no one else but her. Camila was walking down the aisle. She wore her grandmother's lace wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly, a symbol of heritage and love, not wealth. When she reached him, he whispered, just for her to hear, "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen." Their vows were not scripted platitudes. They were pieces of their souls. "Camila," Leo began, his voice steady, "I used to measure my life in quarterly earnings and market caps. I thought success was about building walls. You taught me it's about opening doors. You are my home." When it was Camila's turn, she took his hands. "Leo, you saw the best in me even when I was hidden in a corner. You showed me that a man's strength isn't in his power, but in his gentleness. I promise to always be the safe harbor you can return to." After the ceremony, as they walked out into a shower of paper confetti thrown by the children, Leo led her to a building down the street. The sign was brand new. The Camila Rivera Community Arts Center. Tears streamed down her face again. He hadn't just listened to her dream. He had made it real. Months later, their life had found a lovely, peaceful rhythm. Weekend mornings were filled with the smell of coffee and turpentine. Quiet evenings in the penthouse overlooking the glittering city. That peace was shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. "Sir, it's Sebastian." Patricia's voice was urgent over the phone. "He's launched a hostile takeover. He's leaked manipulated financial documents to the press, creating a narrative of mismanagement. The stock is plummeting. The board is in a panic." Leo felt the ground shift beneath him. Sebastian was no longer playing games of intimidation. He was going for the kill. That night, Leo's home office became a war room. He was surrounded by charts, reports, and grim forecasts. Desperation was pulling him back towards his old self, cold, ruthless, willing to do anything to win. Camila came in, placing a cup of tea on his desk. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the coldness in his eyes. She didn't lecture. She just gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "What are you so afraid of losing, Leo?" she asked softly. The simple question broke through his final defense. He dropped his head into his hands. "Everything," he whispered. And then, for the first time, he told her the whole story. "My father was an artist, Camila. A dreamer. He trusted the wrong partner, a man who bled his company dry. We lost everything. The stress. It led to the accident. For years, I believed his kindness was a weakness that destroyed them. That's why I built this armor." He looked up, letting her see his raw vulnerability. Camila sat beside him, taking his hand. "Your father's weakness wasn't his kindness, Leo. It was his solitude. He faced it alone." She squeezed his hand tighter. "You are not alone." Something inside of Leo broke and healed all at once. He didn't need ruthlessness to be strong. He just needed her. The final press conference was a somber affair. The world expected Leo Sterling to announce his defeat. He walked to the podium, calm and composed. He acknowledged the company's struggles but then presented the real financial records, exposing Sebastian's manipulations. He reframed the investment in the Arts Center not as an expense, but as an investment in the future. In community. In the core values of Nexus. "But you don't have to take my word for it," Leo said, as the reporters began to look skeptical. "I'd like to introduce someone." Patricia Wells stepped forward. The room fell silent. "I have a recording," she said calmly, her voice clear and steady. She revealed Sebastian's attempt to bribe her. A reporter shouted, "Why should we believe you? Why are you so loyal to him?" Patricia looked directly at the crowd. "Years ago, when my father was a struggling accountant, he tried to warn a good man about a bad business partner. That good man was Leo Sterling's father. My family has never forgotten the integrity of the Sterling name." She paused. "I'm just repaying a debt of honor." It was a bombshell. It didn't just vindicate Leo. It utterly destroyed Sebastian's credibility. A week later, Sebastian Cross requested a meeting. He sat in Leo's opulent office. But he looked small and gray. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. "You won," Sebastian said, his voice flat. "I hope you're happy." "I am," Leo replied simply. Sebastian stared out the window for a long moment, then turned back, his gaze falling on a photo of Leo and Camila on the desk. "You know, we weren't so different, you and I. Back at Stanford. We both wanted the world. I just never stopped wanting it. I never found a reason to." He sighed. "You got lucky, Leo. You found your why. I just kept chasing the what." As Sebastian left, Leo didn't feel the thrill of victory. He felt a strange pity. The war was truly over. Not just with Sebastian, but the war within himself. He stood up, no longer interested in the soaring stock charts on his screen. He just wanted to go home. A year after the wedding, Leo Sterling's world had found a peace he'd never known. The boardroom battles had been replaced by lazy Sunday mornings on the terrace, where the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the smell of oil paint from Camila's easel. He still ran his empire. But now, his compass had been recalibrated. On one such morning, as he was scanning the business section, Camila set down her brush. She came to his side, took his hand, and gently placed it on her still flat stomach. "I think Nexus Dynamics is about to have a new, very small stakeholder," she said, a radiant smile spreading across her face. Leo looked from his hand to her sparkling eyes. His entire world narrowed to that single point in time. Joy rose in him, not the explosive thrill of a corporate victory, but a deep, warm happiness that spread through his entire being. He had conquered the world. But only now did he feel like he truly owned it. He knelt, pressing his ear to where their future was growing. And for the first time in his life, the billionaire was speechless. 9 months later, in the sterile white light of a private hospital room, Elena Sterling was born. She was tiny, perfect, with a tuft of dark hair exactly like her mother's. The moment Leo held his daughter for the first time, he felt a love so primal and fierce it was almost frightening. Every past accomplishment faded into insignificance compared to the small weight of this life in his arms. But the perfection of the moment was fractured when a doctor entered, his face a mask of professional empathy. "Mr. Sterling. Ems. Rivera," he began gently. "We've detected a condition with Elena's heart. It's a rare congenital defect. It's operable, but the procedure is complex and risky." Leo's world tilted. He had faced the most ruthless opponents. the most volatile markets, the worst financial crises. He could always fight, negotiate, or buy his way out. But this was an enemy he couldn't intimidate. An adversary his billions couldn't bribe. For the first time since he had become a powerful man, Leo Sterling felt utterly helpless. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital corridors, hushed conversations filled with medical jargon, and sleepless nights. But in that crisis, they found a new strength, not as individuals, but as a team. Leo channeled his fear into action. He was no longer a CEO. He was a strategist in the war for his daughter's life. He established a research foundation, assembled a dream team of the world's best pediatric cardiologists, and used his global network to fast-track access to cutting-edge medical technology. He was using his power not for profit, but for a singular purpose. Camila was the heart of the operation. She transformed the cold hospital room into a sanctuary of hope, taping her colorful sketches to the walls, and rarely leaving Elena's incubator. But her strength radiated further. She organized a support group for the other parents in the pediatric ICU, sharing her empathy and emotional fortitude. Late one night, Leo walked into the ICU and saw Camila softly humming a lullaby. He thought she was singing to Elena, but then he realized she was standing beside another incubator, where a newborn lay alone because his parents had to go home to their other children. In that moment, watching his wife offer unconditional kindness to a stranger at her own moment of greatest pain, Leo understood. This was true strength. This was true wealth. 5 years later, a sunny Sunday afternoon in the backyard of their home in Marin County, across the Golden Gate Bridge, the air was filled with children's laughter. Elena, now a healthy and mischievous 5-year-old, was chasing butterflies. The surgery had been a success. The foundation Leo started had gone on to help dozens of other children. Leo stood on the porch, watching his daughter, a living, breathing miracle running on the grass. Camila came to his side, leaning her head on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Leo smiled, a look of serene contentment on his face. He looked from his daughter's joyful face to his wife's loving eyes. Everything he had ever chased, everything he had ever fought for, was right here. "I was just thinking," he said, his voice soft with emotion, "about my portfolio, and how my most valuable assets are right here." He wrapped his arms around his wife and his daughter as she ran into their embrace. In the golden light of the afternoon, amidst the clear sound of a child's laughter, the man who once had everything finally understood that the greatest fortune wasn't what you owned, but who you loved.